Okay, we're live. Welcome back to the voting sessions of the Environment and Transportation Committee. I'm the chairman, Kumar Barve. I'm joined by my vice chairman, Dana Stein, members of my committee, and it is March 18th, voting list number 13. So here's how we're going to proceed on these. On the first two bills, which are the P3 bills, I'm going to ask the subcommittee chair to fully explain them, and then I'm going to hold them for one voting session because they're big and they're complicated, and so we'll vote on them tomorrow. But we're going to have them described to us, and if there are questions, I want to entertain those. So let's do those last. Let's go to House Bill 579 first. Snare traps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was on the voting last time, and we did the amendments. As amended, House Bill 579 removes Cecil County from the existing county-specific prohibition against the use, sale, possession, setting, placement, or maintenance of a snare trap. Okay,
and there are no amendments?
We did the amendments yesterday, I believe.
Oh, all right. Oh, forgive me, I'm forgetting. Okay, so the bill is before us, favorable with amendments, and was it seconded yesterday? Do you remember?
I doubt it was. I don't think we did any.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the bill before we proceed to a vote? No. Okay. Oh, Delegate Lehman, pardon me. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. It's too late for this year for this bill or for similar bills, but just in the future, I'm not sure who to talk to about this, but these hunting bills that either intentionally or unintentionally catch all these other counties up in what one county is trying to do are really kind of frustrating. That was the case here where 7 or 8 counties were pulled in without being surveyed. And many of our counties, you know, when members of the subcommittee went to them in Prince George's and Baltimore and Anne Arundel, you know, were not happy to hear about this and did not want to be dragged into this. So I'm not sure where that's happening or how, but it's a problem. And so I hope to try to figure out a way to address this kind of thing before next session. Thank you.
That's a valid point. Delegate Terraza.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for holding it for me yesterday. I did check with our county office of law and straighten out my question. So I just wanted to thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. Any further discussion before we proceed to a vote? And it's going to be a roll call because I want to do roll. So, okay, roll call.
Vice Chair Stein.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Learman.
Yes.
Fraser Hidalgo.
Yes.
Otto.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes.
Weibel.
He's voting yes. That was a thumbs up.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes.
Yes.
Silberti. That's the other missing one besides Clark.
Barry's missing? Okay.
I'm trying to get him the link as we speak.
Okay. We'll come back to him at the end after I vote. Go ahead.
Wells.
Yes.
Love.
Yes.
Ruth.
Yes.
Stewart.
Vaughn?
Stewart.
You,
I thought I did it. Yes.
Lehman.
Reluctantly, yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
Teresa.
Reluctantly, yes.
Parrott.
Yes.
Boyce.
Yes.
Delegate Clark. He's excused. Delegate Jalisi.
Yes.
Anderton.
Yes.
Gilchrist.
Yes.
Healy.
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. And is Barry Ciliberti with us? Delegate Ciliberti?
Not yet.
Okay, well, he's absent for that one. Let's go to House Bill 807. The bill passes. 579 passes. Go to 807.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subcommittee recommendation is favorable with amendments. As amended, this bill establishes the task force on recycling policy and recycling and waste systems in Maryland. By June 30, 2022, the task force must report its findings and recommendations to specified committees of the General Assembly. Amendment number 1 makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 alters the membership and duties of the task force, delays the date by which the task force must report its findings and recommendations, and delays the termination date of the task force. Move the amendments.
Second.
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 You're muted, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, you're muted.
I think he's frozen.
Okay, here we go. Can you
All right.
hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
Any discussion on the amendments before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no.
Aye.
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 The ayes have it. Bills before us as amended is,
Second.
all right. Any discussion on the bill as amended?
Mr. Chairman,
Charles,
Yes.
go ahead.
the amendments did take in the introduction and the purpose of the bill and whatnot. We talked about that in subcommittee yesterday, and I'm sure Kristen updated them to. Is that what the technical amendments were?
Yes, I mean, the title of the bill has been changed. Yeah.
Yeah, does Delegate Wyville feel comfortable with it now? I mean,
Well, let's let Delegate Wyville speak for himself.
Yeah, Charles, the amendments don't begin to cover what my task force bill did, so I don't look at this as covering my bill at all. What I was looking more at was technologies, as we talked about, the lady who's manufacturing bricks out of plastic, things like that. This bill doesn't do that, so I don't see it as the same bill. But I appreciate it.
But you're not against the bill, is it? Or
didn't vote. I'm not against the bill, but it does encompass the bill that I had submitted. So, I may just withdraw mine and do it next year. I realize we don't want two task forces going in the same year. And I had talked to the chairman about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion on the bill before we vote? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is Delegate Soliberti with us yet?
He is.
Okay. I'm going to assume that Barry's voting in favor.
Yes.
Okay. All right, the bill passes unanimously among, I guess, everybody's present. Are all 24 of us here?
Just Delegate Clark is still gone in the
Oh,
hearing.
okay. Unanimous among those present. Okay, next, House Bill 933.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 933. Let me start out by saying House Bill 933 is a local bill. Local bill. This is a local bill, Mr. Chair. Did I mention this was a local bill?
Marvin?
Yes, sir.
Is it a local bill?
Boy, you must be clairvoyant.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. This is a local bill, Mr. Chair, from Anne Arundel County. And the bill authorizes, not mandates. The bill authorizes Anne Arundel County to increase the county transfer tax rate on a written instrument conveying the title of real property or leasehold interest in real property if the actual consideration is 1 million or more, and establishes the Housing Trust Special Revenue Fund to be used to provide affordable housing to moderate and low-income individuals in the county, which is Anne Arundel County, because this is a local bill, including City of Annapolis. I move the bill. There are no amendments, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second? Okay. Delegate Otto.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. What was the county vote on that? I assume we have a county letter of support of the delegation, or
We're supposed to.
Do we have also from the county council, is there a letter of support from them?
Well, we don't require that, but I'd be interested to know.
I don't have one either. I don't have anything in my file from the delegation or the city council.
Well, I'd suggest that we hold this bill until the next voting session. And find that.
No, you know what? I'm now.
Reject that.
I think Matt has
No.
the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm now going to exercise my option to not hold bills because we're getting up against the deadlines. And ordinarily, I like to entertain these hold motions, but in this instance, I'm going to.
Well, I'd like to vote for the bill too, but I'm not going to if I can't have that. So
I think Matt was going to answer the question.
Go ahead.
The vote in the delegation was 10-5.
Okay. Do you, does I mean, it doesn't have to, but does, I mean, county executive clearly supports it, but any information from the council, just if you have it?
There was no testimony that was provided from the council to the committee.
Okay, Delegate Lehman.
Hi, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I'm the only member of this committee from Anne Arundel County that represents part of Anne Arundel County. And
okay.
So I told the subcommittee that I reminded them it's enabling legislation. County Executive Stuart Pittman came to the delegation and, you know, very strongly supports it and in response to some of the Republican questions, reminded them that the council has to decide to take it up, and they will discuss and debate that that amount from the transfer tax to be able to fund affordable housing. And so, yeah, I know it has the strong support of the county executive. We won't know until we pass it what the county council wants to do with it. That's the nature of enabling legislation. They could ignore it and never take it, or they could take it up immediately when it takes effect and do something with it.
Any further, Delegate Stewart?
Yeah, I just had a question for the subcommittee chair. It's my understanding that the county executive of Anne Arundel is motivated to increase the transfer tax either way, and that this enabling legislation would potentially allow Anne Arundel County to target that increase to people buying expensive homes, more affluent people, rather than having to hit all families with an increase. Would you say that is accurate, Mr. Subcommittee Chair?
Yes, you are totally accurate. Your law degree comes in handy, I see.
Thank you, Mr. Subcommittee Chair. That is my only question.
All righty then.
I have a question.
Sure, Delegate Parrott.
This is, I guess, a new policy. No other counties are allowed to do this right now. Is that right?
I don't know how to I don't know that answer the question. If you're asking if any other county can increase their transfer tax, the answer is they can. So
I think he means targeting it to higher, having different levels.
Right.
Is that what you mean? Yeah,
that is what I mean. Yes.
I don't know if any other counties have asked to do so.
So just this year, I was in front of HGO with Delegate Pendergrass, and I had a bill that was local to Washington County, and she killed it. And the reason why she killed it was she said this sets a precedent so all the rest of the counties could do it later. So using that logic, I'm going to vote against this bill. And if we're going to show local courtesy, then we should show it. Or if we don't, then we don't. But in that case, she said that set precedent. This sets new precedent, so I'm going to have to go no.
okay. Any further discussion or debate on this bill before we vote?
Yeah, if I could.
Yeah, Ann.
I just want to address the question that he raised because.
Hold on, Ann. Somebody needs to mute themselves because there's in the background. Okay, great. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly address the issue of local courtesy because I think the distinction between local courtesy when it's already established policy and it's just one more county adding on is one thing. And when it is setting some kind of a precedent, it is another thing. But that other thing then arises on its merits and not just because of local courtesy, in my opinion. But I think lots of people have different ways of interpreting that aspect of it. And I think it's not a clear-cut issue. I think it's a good policy, regardless whether it's a statutory precedent or not. It is enabling. It may or may not ever be enacted in Anne Arundel County. And so I think it is something that the Anne Arundel delegation wants. And I think that it's a good policy. So I'm going to vote for it.
You know, I'd like to talk a little bit about local courtesy as well, because I'm over the map on it. There was a period in my career where I was very staunchly in support of local courtesy until Montgomery County passed a bill that I thought was a terrible precedent. And then I became less enamored with local courtesy. So, you know, I've been at all points in the continuum, and I'm somewhere in the middle now. So it's very rare for me to rely exclusively on local courtesy. I don't want to speak to the bill itself, but that's at least I feel so much better that I've said that. Okay, let's proceed to a vote, and let's make it a roll call vote. Trish, roll call.
Sure. Vice Chair Stein,
Yes.
Holmes,
Yes.
Learman,
Yes.
Fraser Hidalgo,
Yes.
Otto,
No.
Jacobs,
No.
Wyville,
No.
and Prey.
Yes.
Siliberti,
Negative. No.
Wells,
Yes.
Love,
Yes.
Ruth,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Beeman,
Yes.
Harrison,
Yes.
Tarasa,
Yes.
Parrot,
No.
Boyce,
Yes.
Delegate Clark, still excused. Jalisi,
Yes.
Anderton,
Cornbread. Well,
Who's that?
absent.
Who's in there? Gilchrist,
Yes.
Ely,
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. And I'm reading the mind of Delegate Siliberti, and I would like to know what the vote total is.
Excellent. Excellent.
17-5. But Delegate Anderton is in the meeting, but not in his chair, so.
Right, not on this vote. Okay.
Okay.
House Bill, so the bill carries. House Bill 980.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee voted favorable on this second local bill that we are looking at today. As amended, HB 980 alters the definition of application as it applies to the Maryland Public Ethics Law relating to applications for land use decisions in Prince George's County to exclude participation in adopting and approving a county-wide zoning map that is recommended by the planning board and approved by the district council, where the intent is to implement an approved general plan. The subcommittee amendment is from the delegation. It adds an 18-month sunset. Move the amendments.
Second.
Is there a second on the amendments? Okay, I think I heard a second. Any discussion on the amendments? So Delegate Ruth, do you want to speak on the amendment or the bill?
Mr. Chair, on the bill.
Okay. All right, so let's proceed to a vote on the amendments. All those in favor of this amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, on the bill is before us as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. You know, before I recognize you, Delegate Ruth, I'm afraid I have to do a grouchy old dude thing here. This law was passed in 1992, I think, originally, the first time it was passed. And it was, and God, I just threw it away. I had this cheesy pair of sunglasses that the realtors gave us the week that the bill was voted on. And Van Hollen and I were sitting on the, we called it the unethical ethics bill. And so we were sitting there with the cheesy shades, because it was a shady bill, we thought. And we encouraged everybody in the Montgomery County delegation to get their realtor cheesy shades on for the voting of that bill. So, you know, I threw it away. You know, I've been wanting to I've been keeping that piece of junk around because I knew one day it would come in handy, and well, I threw it away when, you know, a few weeks before it would have come in handy. So in any case, Ann Healy might remember that day on the floor of the House. So in any case.
I do. I remember it well. I also
Yeah.
remember, you know, we were newbies then. We were
Yeah.
brand new to the whole process, and it was an experience, educational experience for both of us.
Yes, it was. Okay, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for sharing that story. I really wish I could see a picture of that. That sounds fantastic. I've been getting an awful lot of emails about this. I imagine everybody else has as well. And I did hear you just say that you're trying not to hold bills. I did want to ask if it would be possible to hold it for 24 hours to try to get a better understanding of it.
I'm going to be guided by. No, I would really.
No, I'm sorry, I will reject.
No, go ahead, Delegate Harrison.
Yes, I'm sorry, I will reject that and ask that we not do that. Having been the past chair of the Prince George's County Council, which also sat as the district council, so I chaired that for a couple of years. And this is something that we have worked on for a very long time. I understand what the advocates, or the opponents, I should say, are saying. The bottom line is that all this does is allow Prince George's County to move forward with a zoning plan that has been underway for 6 years. Our zoning had been outdated for, I don't know how many years, what they said. We had over 140 some zones that they're trying to narrow down. That's all that this is about.
So somebody needs to mute themselves because there's some background noise and I can't hear Delegate Harrison properly. Go ahead.
So I guess the bottom line is that I'm going to respectfully ask that we reject that and move forward with the vote.
Okay, well, it isn't a formal motion, but you made yourself known. So let's proceed with the debate. Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I did send you a message ahead of time to let you know that when it's time to vote, I would like to explain my vote.
Sure.
Also, I'm obviously getting a lot of those emails, and I want to be able to explain my vote, which is going to be different than my delegation vote, because I had amendment ideas that were rejected by the council. But I will explain that when it's time to vote. Thank you.
No, actually, why don't you just tell us now? Because it's perfectly
Sure, okay.
legitimate as a point of debate.
Yeah, okay. So,
Stop it, David.
right. So I expressed very serious reservations about this bill. It was late filed at the end of January. And at the public hearing, anybody that wants to can review that Zoom tape. I said I felt like this bill was a wolf in sheep's clothing. I don't think it was presented clearly at all. Several of the council members reached out to me after that and explained it further. I talked back and forth with them. I was the one who suggested, after talking to some other council members and some advocates, I suggested to the County Affairs Committee that sunset provision. And so at the time of the delegation vote, the sunset provision had been added, and I felt like I could vote for it. I wasn't thrilled with it, but I voted for it. Since then, I not only have gotten a lot of the calls and the emails, but I looked at the bill some more and came up with another amendment idea, which I put in writing, a draft amendment that said that the council would have to publicize all of those contributions and should return them. And that is based on some existing state ethics law that requires actually the General Assembly, if it violates its fundraising rules and takes money during session, you have to return the money plus a penalty. So I took that language and modified it and sent it to the council leadership, and they said, no, absolutely not. They would not entertain any amendments. They just wanted the bill to go forward. And I have tried to make clear I am absolutely not opposed to the MAP amendment going forward. I really think it needs to. But what I do have trouble with is the bill's approach to just sort of making the problem go away. rather than figuring out a sort of, in my mind, better way to deal with it. And so, with that said, I did tell at least one, if not two council members, what you essentially expressed, Mr. Chairman. The underlying statute is very problematic. And I've had these conversations with Delegate Harrison and other colleagues over the years. And, I served with her for 8 years on the council. The underlying statute has a lot of problems. It has a lot of flaws and loopholes. And I did commit to looking at that statute during the interim. I think that there needs to be an effort to fix it. And I'm committed to doing that. So thank you for letting me explain my vote.
Well, I mean, actually, it's not so much an explanation of your vote as it was debate, and that's completely appropriate for you to express yourself during debate like that. Delegate Terraza.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share Delegate Lehman's concerns about this. I'm very torn on this because I also have concerns about the underlying statute. I think it's a very difficult statute to work. And I feel very strongly that you should be able to go forward, and there's so much work that's gone into this, and there should be a map amendment that goes with it. I'm very concerned about this as a solution for this, but I wish that some of Delegate Lehman's proposals had been taken up. But I do understand that this is the approach that Prince George's County has taken on this. I'm more than happy to work with Delegate Lehman and anybody else on bettering that particular statute over this time. If there's going to be a sunset, which it sounds like there will if this passes, I think that time should be used to come up with a better way to keep the sunshine on those donations, rather than just having to, take this approach to it. I'm very uncomfortable with this, but I'm torn because I understand the Delegate Harrison's desire and the need for Prince George's County to move forward on this project that's been going on for so long. So thank you for letting me weigh in.
Delegate Harrison, then Delegate Soliberti, in that order.
One last thing. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think Councilmember Turner mentioned this, but whenever there is a request for a zoning amendment, individuals have to disclose whether or not there is basically a conflict of interest. And I've just lost my train of thought as the exact terminology. An affidavit. An affidavit has to be filed. We went through this with several other plans, and the attorney, the first thing they ask is, have you filed an affidavit? I forget the terminology, but that's all done, and it goes to this. And so, as was said, it's basically enabling and allowing them to just move forward here. And that's really the bottom line. All we're doing is allowing them to move forward. And so I would like to continue on. I'm sorry, I got distracted. I got a call from the other committee about my bill. So.
Oh, sure, I understand. Okay, Delegate Soliberti, then Delegate Terraza and Wyville in that order, I believe. And if you don't want to speak, put your hand down, please, so it makes it easier for me to. I can't put people's hands down.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Go ahead, Barry.
Just out of curiosity, what was the vote in the county delegation on this bill?
We have that, don't we, Marvin?
It was 18-0.
Oh,
that's called a landslide.
Well,
18-0.
It's 18-0, but there were 5 people missing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Delegate Wyville and then Terraza in that order.
I'm sorry, I thought you had Delegate Terraza prior to me. Just
I've forgotten.
Delegate Harrison's comment. In subcommittee, the comment was made that affidavits would not need to be filed because it's no longer considered an application. That's what the bill does. It changes that. So there would not be that disclosure, is my understanding.
Oh, Delegate Terraza, unless somebody has an answer for that, I'm going to.
That was sort of my, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was really actually my question as well, because I would feel more comfortable with it with what Delegate Harrison was saying with the affidavit still needing to be filed, but my understanding from subcommittee was that they would no longer need to be filed.
And I believe that's correct. For these comprehensive zoning, affidavits wouldn't need to be filed. The question that came up in subcommittee was, does this law even apply? I mean, do we even need this bill? And that's an open legal question. So it's an open legal question as to whether if they need the law, they need to do the affidavits. They don't need the law, they don't need to do the affidavits.
Okay, so Delegate Ruth and then Lehman, I think in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add, I guess, me too, that I recognize the need to move forward on this, but I would be more comfortable if there were disclosure as well as allowing them to move forward. Thank you.
Delegate Lehman.
Yeah, so I was told by one or more council members that the State Ethics Commission did not want to give the council, when they realized that it had this problem that could interfere with its ability to go forward with the countywide map amendment hearing, that the State Ethics Commission did not want to put like a decision or even advisory like we asked for from the AG in writing, but the council was definitely advised that the only way to fix this was with state legislation. So that is why they are going forward with this. They were given that advice. The other thing I want to say quickly on affidavits that I found problematic, as I was told by a council member who I talked to for more than an hour and a half about this late one night, and that council member said that the affidavits will continue to be filed. So I'm not sure. I'm confused about what Delegate Wyville thinks he heard in subcommittee, but that definitely these affidavits actually will continue to be filed right up until when the countywide map amendment hearing occurs. So whether that hearing is next month or whether that hearing is next December, which is what the sunset provision allows for. It allows for this bill, once it becomes law, to stay in place until December of 2022. And so it could be quite a while before this hearing takes place. And in the meantime, folks will just continue to submit affidavits, saying whether they contributed. And some of these same people, there could be a nexus with some of these same folks asking for upzonings as part of the countywide map amendment. So that will continue.
Okay, Delegate Boyce and then Wyville, and then I think we're going to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm a little confused. So if you can file currently an affidavit, and as an elected official, you would have to file this information anyway, correct? Yes or no?
Are you asking? Sorry, are you asking?
Yeah, I am asking.
So, I mean, everybody still has to disclose their donations.
Absolutely.
I mean, elected officials, still have to disclose.
So one way or another, it's being
You're gonna
disclosed.
see. Yeah. Yes.
So then I guess the question is what is, I'm getting confused about what the hot topic is. If according to Delegate Lehman, that they're going to have to still file an affidavit, and as an elected official, we still have to file and disclose what, and you would see that, right? And so you would see that. Help me understand what the concern is, because it seems like either way, it's almost like a double transparency. If I'm having to file because I'm an elected official and I'm filling out an affidavit, you get the information twice.
Well, let me recognize Delegate Lehman and go ahead.
So the affidavits still have to be filed. The other part of that is that, which is why the council has been advised by its own council that it can't have this countywide map amendment hearing, because if you receive a contribution, then you have to recuse yourself, or you're supposed to recuse yourself for a period of 36 months after you get a contribution from somebody that in this case would be seeking a change to the countywide map. In normal times, when the council, this is a once in a generation thing, this comprehensive, is what we call the zoning rewrite that we voted on in 2018. and the map amendment accompanies it. It's taken all these years. There's been a gap between passage of the underlying law.
We have one in Baltimore City. Yep.
And okay, yeah, and so there's supposed to be you're supposed to not be able to vote for 36 months then on a project that, you know, where somebody gave you a donation for.
So in other words, people can't vote to pass the rewrite because they may have received a contribution from someone
Right, exactly.
associated with it. So, I mean, this is essentially what this is about, because, I mean, let's be honest, I mean, there are contributions I certainly reject and send back just on, so I guess the question is there just a fear that because someone is getting a contribution that they will indefinitely be making favor changes on a donator's behalf? I'm just trying to understand, because I've gotten those emails as well. So,
well, let me. I'm because Ann Healy's from Prince George's County and she hasn't spoken yet. I'm going to recognize her next. Then I'd like to actually debate on this bill, and hopefully we can proceed to a vote on this. Go ahead, Delegate Healy.
Thank you. I wasn't planning to say anything but after listening to all the discussion, I just want to be clear about there's one factor that hasn't been discussed yet. The Prince George's County Council works under term limits, and Delegate Harrison, Delegate Lehman are former members of the council, and two of the council members who represent my district are term limited. They will not be able to be in their seats in December of 2022. There will be new members in those seats. And so I don't think that they have any they just want to get the job done that they've been working on for all these years. And it is something that hasn't been redone in what they said was 50 years. I've lived in the county 42 years, and I know that it's complicated. I have never served on the county council, but I think that this bill is something that, especially with the sunset, is necessary to just deal with this one major piece of legislation that really can't go forward with all the thought and work that's been put into it unless the legislation is passed. So I'm going to vote for it.
Let me say something about the bill, and then I'll recognize Delegate Lehman, who will get the last word. I'm going to vote for the bill. I have never in my career been comfortable with this notion of holding, of saying that you can't accept money from people who have business before your legislative body. I've never been comfortable with that. And the reason for that is that, you know, what is the end to that? Because I know that zoning and development are the most important things that a county council does, but they're not the only important things. We're choosing, though, to put an impediment on this kind of campaign contribution. I think in this day and age, especially different from 1992, when I voted for that bill because Mike Miller wanted it. Governor Schaefer didn't want it, but I knew that in 2 years, Governor Schaefer would be gone, and Mike Miller, I thought, would outlast me. Well, almost, but not quite, but the point is that I never felt good about that vote that I cast back then. I've never supported, many years ago, my colleague, Lou Simmons, actually passed an amendment on the slot machine bill saying that we can't accept campaign contributions from, people who run slot machine venues. But, I'm sure he would have found objectionable the idea of prohibiting trial lawyers from contributing to members of the Judiciary Committee. I just don't know where this all ends. So I'm going to vote for the bill. I think that Prince George's County has made a hard decision, but I think a correct one. And I'm not with them for local courtesy. I'm with them because I agree with their stance on the merits. Go ahead, Mary, and you will have the last word. but you would have to be unmuted.
Yeah, so I know. So respectfully, Mr. Chairman, I would just, remind you and anyone else who is here then, I think a lot of people do agree the underlying statute is very seriously flawed. And so it's up to this body to either amend it to make it more workable, or frankly, and I know a lot of my constituents would be cringing right now, or repeal it if people see fit. But it is the law that we have. And however flawed it is, it's the law that we have, and that's that's where we are right now. And I did commit to the one council member, and I will follow through on it. I don't know if the law can be quote unquote fixed, but I will be taking a look at it. I did have a conversation with an ethics attorney for the state who, when I said, why isn't this law even really being enforced? And she said, well, it needs to be, but there isn't, adequate funding really. And I want to be clear, this person wasn't with the State Ethics Commission, but this person said, take a look at their budget. It's very, very small. And maybe that's something the legislature can look at in the future after 2023, where we have more say in the state budget. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Where have you been hiding?
Okay. We are going to go to a roll call vote. This is a record for the number of roll call votes. Go ahead, Trish.
Vice Chair Stein,
Yes.
Holmes,
Yes.
Learman,
Yes.
Frazier Hidalgo.
Dave,
Yes. Sorry. Thank you.
Otto,
No.
Jacobs,
No.
Weibel,
No.
Ampray,
Yes.
Siliberti,
Despite the 18-0 vote, I'll vote no. No.
Wells,
Yes.
Love,
Yes.
Ruth,
I'd like to explain my vote quickly. I'll be voting. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be voting yes on this because I'm not from Prince George's County, and out of deference to the need to move forward, but I'm not entirely comfortable with this, not entirely clear on whether the discussions are removed or not. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thought she was in there.
Delegate Stewart,
Yes.
Lehman,
No.
How do you like the Weston?
Harrison,
Yes.
Tarasa,
They take care of you?
I-
mute yourself.
Okay, I'm sorry, thank you. I'm just going to echo Delegate Ruth's comments. I'm going to vote green, but I'm not very comfortable with this, but out of deference to Prince George's County and the need to move forward and their delegations vote for this, I'm voting yes.
Harriet,
We didn't hear you.
You're muted.
Sorry. Yes.
Boyce,
Yes, happy to support Prince George's County.
Clark, still out. Jalisi,
Yes.
Anderton,
Cornbread?
Did I hear Delegate Parrott vote yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, well, I can't let a man go alone. Yes.
I'm sure that.
Gilchrist,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
Chairman.
Chairman votes yes. Okay. Somebody has YouTube on. I heard myself being repeated. What's the vote total?
18-5.
Okay. House Bill 980 passes. Let's go to House Bill 67, Delegate Learman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So House Bill 67 is a lot like the bill that we had last year. That was also called the Promises Act. And it is a bill that establishes various requirements for P3 agreements for the project to construct toll lanes on 495 and 270. So there are a number of amendments that are clarifying. There were some that sort of clarify and just sort of make more clear and precise what some of the promises were. The bill is a pretty simple bill. It simply just puts requirements in for any agreement that's signed on the 495-270 project. The BPW, before it signs, has to make sure these are in the agreements. And it just goes through and lists each of them. So it's not a technically difficult bill. I will read the amendments, but many of them sort of they're not all adding new promises. Some of them are just clarifying ones that already existed too. So in the amendments, we alter the toll revenue required to be transferred to a transit fund from 10%, so it used to be 10%, and we've changed it to an amount agreed to by relevant county under an MOU. That's a little bit more in line with what the promise actually was.
Hold on, somebody needs to mute themselves because I'm hearing noise in the background, so better, go ahead.
Okay, we also alter the requirements for a bike and pedestrian lane on the American Legion Bridge. We alter the limitations on state funding for the project to clarify that it's just for this current section. We apply the prohibition on submitting agreements to the board until the EIS, the environmental impact statement, approval just to section agreements rather than the entire agreement. We require bike and pedestrian improvements to remove barriers and provide connectivity in specific areas of Montgomery and Prince George's County. We require collaboration with local stakeholders to deliver specific improvements for new and existing transit. We require a commitment to work collaboratively to avoid or mitigate certain community, cultural, or environmental impacts. And we prohibit contract award unless the bidder agrees to a project labor agreement that demonstrates union and local involvement. So first I will move the amendments.
Second.
You're on mute, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we can't hear you. You're still on mute.
Oh, damn it. Sorry. Here I'm bugging people. Anyway, okay. So on the amendments, any discussion on the amendments before we vote on them? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote on the amendments. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
Okay. Okay. The amendments carry. Any initial questions or discussion on the bill before I hold it and we move on to the next bill? Delegate Fraser Hidalgo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate Learman. So just a couple of questions, just some things that have been brought to my attention recently, and I want to just get some clarification on.
Sure.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, thank you. One is I've been told that this bill, although slightly different from last year, but pretty much in a similar posture, puts the potential project in jeopardy as far as create some political insecurity, which makes potential partners more hesitant to actually get involved on a project of this size. Can you speak to that at all?
Sure. So yeah, I understand that is the concern of some folks. I think that's incorrect. This project is going to have a tremendous impact on our state, right? And it is not within the purview. And in Maryland, the General Assembly does not decide which projects we are going to build or not. If we decided that, then my neighborhood would be under construction right now for a red line stop. It is the executive branch that decides whether we're going to build projects. And they've decided that we're going to build this project. And this bill will not stop the project from moving forward. What it does do, however, is it provides certainty to communities, certainty to labor unions, certainty to the entities, the developers, about what promises that have been made are actually going to be kept. Like which promises are for real, right? So all along this process that has been going on for quite some time, first Secretary Ron, now Secretary Slater, sometimes the governor have said in different forums, we are absolutely going to do this. So we're absolutely going to do that. So it's just important that those guardrails that to be clear, the General Assembly did not articulate, right? This is not a project that you or I or anybody in the General Assembly came up with, and those were not promises that anybody in the General Assembly made, but to make sure that those promises are carried through on. And it's important that we do that because this is going to be one of the biggest P3s in America. And so it's important that we have some assurances, that our taxpayers have some assurances, that everybody who's a party to these agreements have some assurances on which promises are actually going to be followed through on. And I guess I'll just finish that by saying, I think that, in this bill as amended, we've clarified it. There were some questions that I saw about where the promises came from and whether we were actually, speaking to the exact promises or not. I think in the amendments, we clarify that a great deal. So that really is what the promises were. And I think it really just puts guardrails on the project. It doesn't stop it. It will still move forward, but it puts some guardrails up that I think are important for taxpayers.
Okay, thank you. And
Thanks.
then I have one other question, but I don't know if you want me to do it on this or the other bill, or are you kind of putting them together, Mr. Chairman?
You can ask it now. I don't know.
Is that all right?
Sure.
Damn, I'll just leave it on. I have no background noise here. No, we're going to do 485 next. So if you have questions about that, you'll get your bite at the apple on that.
Okay.
But before I go to Delegate Love, did you have your hand up or no? Okay. So let me just be very explicit here, Brooke. I have heard an allegation that stuff was added into this that was not a promise made by the administration or some member of the administration. You're saying straight up that that's not true. These are only utterances or statements that came out of the mouth of members of the administration.
Yeah, I mean, I have a nice chart here that was filed with the testimony that says exactly where each of the promises is. So, BPW item, BPW transcript, environment and transportation briefing.
So there are no random promises that were not made that are now in the bill.
I mean, the ones that I have seen, I have backup for. If there's specific ones, then certainly ask. But no, I mean, these are ones that, that are here.
Asked and answered. Thank you, Delegate Wells.
Thank you. Sorry, I was mid-bite.
I know, I was timing it.
I thought I had a couple more seconds. Excuse me, everyone.
That's okay.
So I guess the question I have though, because I know that recently they selected who the partner would be, and I want to say it was broken down. I think there was initially 5 groups that bid for the project. And so because the procurement process is already underway, I'm just kind of wondering, like, what signal does it send? And primarily my concern.
Melissa, you cut out on us.
Okay. I don't know what the last part is, but I was just simply saying about the fact that the procurement process is underway. They've selected who the partner will be for the project, or the team will be for the project. And so, we hear a lot in our committee around predictability, and especially with large projects like this. I'm a little concerned in a very small field of people that play on this scale for infrastructure, for our highways, but also for transit. I'm just wondering, what signal are we sending to people that we might be hoping to rely on for future transit projects, specifically public transit and specifically rail?
I think I understand the question. I think it's a fair question. I mean, I think in some part what we're saying is that we're going to hold our this administration and future administrations to the promises that they make. And so that we should take the word of our elected officials for good. So if, so that, contractors don't come in and say, oh, well, the governor and secretary of transportation may have promised this or that in a committee hearing or in a briefing to the Board of Public Works, but we can just make sure that that's not in the, we'll just make sure that that's not in the contract going forward. I think that's the signal that we're trying to send, is to say, a promise is a promise. And that's, we passed this bill last year because we were hoping to have this done before it was, fully bid so that the people would know, what they're getting to. There's been no development agreement signed yet. And so that's why, people will still know what they're signing up for if this passes this year.
Okay. I mean, we may have a disagreement there a little bit, only because I guess my thing is I understand the goals of this. Let me be very clear about holding the administration accountable. But like this entire process does not just include us in the administration. Yeah. It does include the market of individuals that we might want to use for future projects. And so I just, I think I'm gonna take a look at the bill more, but I just think that there is, as someone that works in the industry where I know it's limited, and knowing that we're competing with states like Virginia for public transportation and for infrastructure, I'm just concerned that we might potentially, for national firms that are paying attention and do work elsewhere, I'm just concerned that we might be potentially kind of cutting off our nose to spite our face. And I'm really concerned that as we have resources that are limited, and we might be using the P3 model again in the future, that we could be also creating some challenges for us to attract bidders, especially for public transit.
Well, I think you work in this industry, so I'm not gonna try to say that you're wrong, because I don't work in the industry, but I think for us, it's just, this is a project that is not going to stop with this administration. It's going to go through to the next administration too. So who knows what that next administration would want to do, right? Like I have no idea what, and so this is a way for us to say, we're, whatever this administration or the next administration, whoever it is, these are the guardrails that at least a General Assembly wants put up. And so, just so we can speak clearly.
Can I interrupt? Can I interrupt just here briefly? David has to go to a JPR hearing. I was just wondering, Dave, if you wanted to ask a question before you leave. I just wanted to give you that chance before I recognize Jen and Delegate Clark. Or to allow more.
I'll ask a question and I'll try to stay on as long as I can. And just Delegate Learman, the other one, I guess this is more on 485.
I'll allow it, yeah.
Thank you. Can you talk about, what I've been hearing is that there's a kind of a new way of looking at the P3 called a progressive P3, and that when it comes to some of the environmental studies that this should be done in conjunction with a potential partner. And I don't know a lot about it, so I wanted to throw that out. Do you know a lot about that, or is that part of this bill, or should it be part of this bill, or?
Brooke, now it's your turn to be muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, someone muted me. Okay, all 485 does is establish a P3 oversight review board for projects that are $500 million or more, and says, this review board is going to be available to review its big responsibility is when there's when we're trying to decide whether to take a public asset and turn it into a P3 project. This board will be one of the entities that weighs in on whether we should do that or not. That's the big part of what this bill does. It's an approval process for P3s that are valued at more than $500 million. The amendments change it to staff it by DLS, to say that they need to be able to review pre-solicitation reports, that they can consult with reporting agencies. But in essence, the job of this review board, which is only for P3s that are more than $500 million, is to add an extra level of scrutiny and expertise. Because none of us we're not dealing with P3s all the time. The state isn't doing these P3s all the time. So it's important that a group of people become more expert at the P3 process and understanding it better. And before we turn a project, a public good, over to private use and development, that we have an expert body making that decision. And the board consists of members of the Senate, members of the House, and members appointed by the governor. So there will be, all of us working together to decide this issue. And that is the 485. It establishes additional expertise for these really huge P3 projects.
Okay, I will go. Melissa, I interrupted you. Did you get your question answered?
I guess my last question that I'll add to it is that I know that we passed legislation in the past. In the past, we passed it. And so my question is it our intention that we would like to add some of the similar language to that moving forward? Because I think it's that we are looking at this, but I also hope that we're not just using this as kind of like, well, this is the P3 in front of us right now, but that like we are beginning to use some of these standards, especially the labor protections. I don't know if the PLA language is legal. I'm not sure. I know sometimes it has to be between the actual construction manager and the whoever does the procurement. But obviously, I love PLAs, and so I'm wondering if this is something that are we moving in this direction as a state to not just hold our administration accountable for the I-270 45 expansion, but do this on all other P3s in the future, because that's I think that's important.
You mean for HB 67 or HB 485? Sorry.
I'm on 67. Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. I'm just going back. Okay. For 67, I think we have learned so I think one thing to keep in mind is that the P3 process in Maryland is very new, right? Lieutenant Governor Brown set up the process, like had a big commission to decide how we were going to start working on P3s. And the purple line is the first P3 that the state's done, right? The first big transportation P3. So this is still a very, very new practice for the state. And I think the state is still learning a lot about how to do P3s, or even whether it wants to do these types of P3s, right? And so to me, 67 is very specific to the 495. I mean, 67 by its very nature is very specific to the 495-270 project. And it's just putting up guardrails for the life of the project, right? And if one of those guardrails needs to come off at some point in future years down the roads because something doesn't work, well, we meet every year, right? So we can work on that issue. But I'm hesitant to say that 67 will like set some sort of precedent or applies to lots of P3s because we just don't do a lot of these big P3s. And I think we have learned a lot from the Purple Line P3, right? Like I hope we've learned something from the Purple Line P3, and that is that, these are really complicated and messy. And at the end of the day, if the private developer wants to walk away, like the recourse we have is to go to court. And that's not great for our residents, right? Because that means there's a half-constructed transportation project somewhere, and we're then in litigation for the next 5 years, or we have to fork over more money from an already bankrupt transportation trust fund. So, I think 67 is really just about putting some guardrails up, and it's not about setting, because every P3 is so different, it's hard to say that it's about setting precedent.
Mr. Chair, if I just add one thing, it's just relevant. Sure. Because you raised a good point. And I think that our only two examples we have is the Purple Line, which, as you said, and we have this one. And with the Purple Line, my understanding is that the issue again was, there were in effect, the issue was that because of delays over time for the contractor, it pushed the project back further and further, which then caused some financial implications. And so that's strike one in terms of how we look externally. And then now potentially this one maybe not as big of a deal per se, but it still is a signal to the market that would be interested. Now we're saying, hey, let's add some more additional things to the procurement process after 5 teams put money and time to go through the process, and they select one. And so now we're kind of throwing something else into it. So I would argue that potentially some could argue that we have not put our best foot forward as a state twice on the first 2 P3s in our state.
Well, I guess I just say, I think that this is what we are passing here is not necessarily going to change what's in that agreement. Doing a community benefit agreement, I believe, is already like they're going to do that. So I don't think that things will necessarily change for the developers. These are because these are things that the administration has already said that they plan to do. So, and it may not be that they're also developing this, the P3, the 495-270 and all these different sections and phases. And so some of the things in this bill will not apply to every section or every phase. And so there are going to be future agreements that have not even begun to be drafted yet, and certainly aren't in front of the BPW yet, that this bill will apply to, maybe 6 years down the road. But this, I think, in some ways gives some certainty to those potential contractors because it's in statute then, right? I mean, one of the things that held up the purple line was all the litigation. And I could see this type of legislation actually preventing some litigation because we're sort of laying down markers on items that people are concerned about. And that's why promises have been made on them. So we're saying, okay, rather than litigating this, let's put it in law so we don't have to litigate it.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Jen and Jerry Clark, and then stop on this and go to the next bill. And so go ahead, Jen, and then Jerry, and then I'll hold the bill and we'll go to 485.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Jen, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doggett, Learman, so this is codifying the promises. Like some of this is codifying the promises they made to the community. Is that, and
yes.
So this is offering predictability to the community.
Yes, and to the contractors.
Right. So I guess from my perspective, this is beneficial to the state in that predictability because when you make promises to a community, and this is just some of my local government years, and probably you guys have similar experience in state government, but when you make promises to the community and then you break those promises to the community, it makes it very hard in the future to get community agreement on anything. And so I guess I see the value for future contracts on that predictability for the community, because then the community knows they can rely on those promises that either, department heads or the contractors or whoever comes in and says, well, we're going to give this community benefit or that community benefit.
Well, Jen, it kind of has to be in the form of a question.
Isn't that so?
Oh, I thought we were debating. Aren't we debating? I thought we were just.
I don't know.
I think that was the end of that. Isn't that so?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm done.
All right, I'm going to hold 67. Let's move on to 485.
Okay, so I've already explained basically what it does. Amendment number 1 makes technical changes. Amendment number 2, wait, did we already adopt the amendments? I can't remember. No, maybe we didn't.
We haven't done anything on 485.
Okay, great. Okay. Amendment number 2 strikes provisions establishing that certain municipal planning organizations shall staff P3. So we took the BMC and the WashCog out. If you remember, they were unhappy in it, so they are now gone and they were replaced by DLS. This requires for P3s that are proposed to be developed in phases that there's a PSR for each phase, which is actually what was intended by the original law that was passed, but hasn't actually happened. So this is trying to codify.
You mean the original law that Anthony Brown passed?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So we intended for there to be a PSR for each phase of a project, but they hadn't anticipated sort of phased projects at that time because this is all so new. I mean, it's still an evolving field, right? The idea of these P3s. Requires for a P3 with a total value that exceeds $500 million that this review board receive a copy of the P3 agreement and that credit and risk analyses of the contracts under the P3 agreement be performed by a financial advisor chosen by the treasurer. Move the amendments.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the amendments before we vote on them? Okay. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There's the amendments carry. The bill is before us as it did. I'm going to hold this bill. We're going to vote on it tomorrow, but let's talk about it. So, Delegate Healy.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Brooke, you described this board as experts, but then you said they would be members of the House and the Senate and.
Yeah, good question.
I'm sorry, I just got confused.
Yeah, no, I think what I was trying to clarify is that, we don't all, not all of the members of the House and the Senate have the time or should become expert on P3 law, right? But what would be good is if there were some of us who really understood what Lieutenant Governor Brown did and the law he passed, and really understood how P3s work, so that those people, when it came time for there to be these big P3s and we were making a decision about whether we were going to allow a P3 to move forward that was over $500 million, those members would have some say in the decision. So not that we're appointing experts, but that members of our bodies will become more expert on this topic. Does that help?
Yeah, after they're appointed to this, then they would do a deep dive and become more expert.
Right.
Like when we do a summer study project.
Exactly.
We become more expert in that particular subject.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any
No,
other
thank you.
question?
Any other questions before I hold the bill? All righty then, we're going to hold this and vote on it tomorrow. And that is the end of I think that's the end of our voting session. Announcements.
Mr. Chairman,
Jim.
the Agriculture Subcommittee plans to meet tomorrow. The time is to be determined.
Okay, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Here, Mr. Chairman, the Environment Subcommittee will meet tomorrow at 12:30.
Okay, and your hand's still up. Do you have?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, that was from before. Sorry.
Okay, Marvin.
Yes,
Marvin.
I thought that is DFH going to make an announcement about the motor vehicles meeting? Because it's my intent to meet after him. I have one more bill to go through. If he's not here.
Well, hold on. Let me call DFH. Let's see if hopefully he's not testifying somewhere.
Marvin, what time?
We're supposed to meet at 2:45.
2:45 tomorrow?
Today, we're supposed to meet at
He
2:45.
he sent an email saying right after this voting session.
Okay.
Okay.
That being the case, Mr.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That being the case, Mr. Chair, Housing and Real Property will meet at 4 for one bill. 8 Housing and Real Property, 4 o'clock, one bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any Delegate Wells?
Sorry, I was just emulating my Housing Real Property chairman. That was all.
She's mocking me, that's all.
I was emulating him, not mocking
Yeah,
you.
that's right. I think mocking is a better word to use. Okay. Any other announcements from anybody for the good of the body? Seeing none, we're adjourned, and just, we're going to be voting tomorrow, and we'll be voting probably Saturday as well. So.
There's also one bill hearing tomorrow.
Oh, you're kidding. Is it a big complicated one or is it a local?
You have
Sometimes local bills are big and complicated, Mr. Chair.
The Montgomery County bill.
Oh, right. Okay.
Complicated bill.
Okay. All right.
Complicated.